All right, it's time. Common Sense Ohio.
Ding, 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 ding.
CommonSenseOhioShow.com. We are coming at you live, if you're watching live. If not, it's Memorex. Either way, it is March 21, 2025. We're brought to you, of course, week in and week out by Harper Plus Accounting. We have Harper here. The namesake is here, our sponsor. And the reason he's here is because we're going to talk about some tax and some other stuff. You know, not boring stuff. We're going to make it fun. Norm is not at the table. Norm, we miss you. Norm had some obligations for business today and could not make it, but I'm sure he's watching.
His favorite topic is taxes. I know.
He loves taxes. Norm loves the government. He loves taxes, and he loves the
favorite thing. Favorite things.
And just ask him. He loves everybody.
Yes. I don't know why he's not here.
So all right. Well, so Harper Plus Accounting, my accountant, could be yours, and if you got questions about that, I'm sure Glenn can answer them at his website.
Yes.
HarperPlus.com.
HarperCPAPlus.com.
HarperCPAPlus.com. All right. Time for this day in history. It is March 21, 2025. So March 21, 1925. We have two places or two names that are going to be relevant. Butler and Dayton, neither of which is in Ohio. All right. So the Butler Act in 1925 was passed. It outlawed teaching evolution in the schools in Tennessee. And all of that mattered because we just talked about that on another show, talked about this, I don't know if it was a show, but a show we were talking about. All of that mattered because that led to the infamous or famous Scopes monkey trial in Dayton, Tennessee, in 1925, where the ACLU, a guy named John Scopes, this was a show trial, basically. What they did is they set it up. They set it up because they passed this controversial law that says you can't teach evolution only creation in public schools, and somebody wants to challenge it, so they basically stage a trial. They say, Scopes, you act like you're teaching evolution, and we're going to charge you with a crime, and then you can defend yourself, and we can challenge the law. And that's what happened. Scopes, I guess, didn't even know if he actually violated the law, but he was charged with it, and he confessed to it. He confessed to it and was charged with it. So then famously, the ACLU gets involved and agrees to represent Scopes. They bring in a lawyer for him named Clarence Darrow, who is a famous criminal defense lawyer. It's funny, I talked to people in here a couple weeks ago about this, and they didn't know who he was. Interesting, but real famous guy. Mm-hmm. Defended lots of people, even got charged himself with crimes out in California at one point for allegedly bribing a witness. But a story for another day. So one of the famous things about the Scopes monkey trial is that Clarence Darrow put on the witness stand William Jennings Bryant, who was the prosecutor that was assigned to the case. He was a former presidential candidate. Anyway, pretty famous stuff. They made a movie out of it in 1960 with Spencer Tracy playing Clarence Darrow, but they changed the names to protect the innocent, so he wasn't Clarence Darrow. And then there was a remake, I think, with Jason Robards sometime in the 80s or 90s. So anyway, the Scopes monkey trial. I brought this one up. There was lots of stuff to choose from today, but we have stuff going on in this country with the Department of Education and how the legislative branch. Now, this was Tennessee, but now we've got the federal government sort of passing rules, not laws, but rules from an administrative agency about what our educational system should or shouldn't teach. And it's funny that how history tends to
repeat itself.
I can't say it's a total repeat, but it's an interesting,
pendulum swing,
refrain.
I guess you could say, right. Back and forth,
interesting
almost.
Refrain.
Yeah.
So it's, I think we're going to see this now.
What was the result of the trial?
Scopes was convicted. It was later reversed for some legal reason.
Did they hang him?
No, they didn't.
The monkey was hung.
He was ordered to pay a $100 fine.
So no harm, no foul.
No harm, no foul.
Right.
It was so hot.
$100 in 1925, though.
The trial was down. I think it was in July, and it was so hot they actually conducted some of it outside. It was pre-air conditioning.
It's hot in Tennessee.
Yeah. So in the middle of July, it was a humid, sweltering day apparently in Dayton, Tennessee. And again, it was overturned. So check it out. Scopes versus State is the appellate decision, 1926.
And you get two movies on your list too.
And you got two movies to watch. If you haven't, and look, there's some great books on Clarence Darrow. Really fascinating guy.
So effectively, they were allowed to teach that in school then because it was reversed.
It was reversed for some constitutional reason. Now, nowadays, this is an interesting. This will sort of dovetail a little bit with what we're doing today, or what's going on today. What would happen nowadays is that we would, if I were representing Scopes, the first thing I would do is I would file a motion to dismiss the case, and I would say it violates some constitutional provision. authorize Scopes to teach what he wants, whatever it would be. And you would be arguing probably in this situation something called the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, which prohibits the government from establishing a religion. And, I don't think this is the intent of the founders ultimately, but this is how the Establishment Clause has been, I'll call it hijacked or used over the years to prevent prayer in schools and things like that. So it's establishing a religion, violates the First Amendment. And of course, the opposite of the Establishment Clause in the First Amendment is something called the Free Exercise Clause, and they sort of work at odds with each other. Like, how can you freely exercise your religion if you can't establish a religion, and yada yada yada. But
that's why we have attorneys.
That's why we have attorneys. Yeah. That's why we have through creative lawfare over the years, the Establishment Clause has been used to ban things like prayer in schools and now it's coming up again with things like school vouchers, right? Because if you're going to give a voucher to go to one school but not a parochial school, or if you're going to give financial aid for public schools or let you choose there, can they be used in a religious affiliated school? It's private. Still going on today, that debate.
Yeah. Didn't schools, when that was supposed to be in your own township, your 6 by 6 mile square, when Jefferson laid that out or somebody laid that out, you were supposed to, in each township, you're supposed to have one school in that township, or
there might have been
a local rule, like that was the whole, how they mapped that out anyway.
Well, the trick is that was probably in Virginia, not in the country. So the federal government, if you read through the Constitution, you're not going to find a Department of Education.
No way.
Right, because it began in the 70s, right? Didn't we?
You're not going to find a Department of anything.
Yeah.
That's not a right?
It's not
a right in the Constitution? Okay.
So, meaning there's not a branch of government labeled the administrative state. That was manufactured out of whole cloth. And now this is what's going on today. This is the big debate, and I love it because I hate the administrative state. I don't care what any of you think. I hate it. I think it has created this is apolitical to me. It's very constitutional. So, it's created a branch of government that we don't get to vote for. And now, we can jump right into this, but now, I guess this is news. Now we're doing news.
Mm-hmm.
But
we're live now.
So, but now we've got this debate. So we've got Trump trying to dismantle things like USAID and other administrative agencies using DOGE as his weapon to do it.
I'm assuming every department's on the chopping block.
Of course, right?
Department, you've got ag that's being discussed.
Defense, everything's going after.
Defense might be a little bit
fraud and waste.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what happens is the Congress says we're going to allocate, we're going to create this thing or we're going to create this agency or enable the president to do it, and the president does it. So now these people sit at the discretion of the executive branch, and the legal decisions that are going on now have to do with, say, the termination of the USAID workers. The question is, since Congress sort of authorized this funding, can the president then, even though he sits over the administrative agencies, does that strip him of the ability to unfund it? How the nuances work out, we shall see. But if you play this out, if I'm arguing Trump's side of it, I would say, look, if you play this out, you've basically created a completely independent agency that doesn't really answer to anybody except maybe Congress, but Congress has delegated the powers to the president, so it's this circular problem. If you're arguing the other side, you're going to say, wait a minute, we funded it. Now that has formed essentially, if not a constitutional, statutory right to the funding, at least until the funding runs out.
Mm-hmm. Well, funding just means the money's available, but what if you hire 50 more people and you don't have the funding? Well, what do you do? Well, what if you fire 50 more people? What do you do with the extra? So that's right. I think that's two separate issues. And funding does not mean that just said money's available if you want to use the money.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And now, how many of us have been in a situation where, like, I've dealt with plenty of friends, business affiliates, I'm sure you more than I. It's like you have people who operate in budgets, and the budgets depend on funding, government agencies, in fact. And I've heard it 100 times. Well, we have to spend the money. It's just December, and we've got the money. We've got to spend it. And I'm always thinking to myself, well, wait a minute, isn't that my effing money?
I've been on the receiving end of that. When I was in radio and advertising, you'd get that last quarter buys because we got to spend it. We lose it. If we don't spend it, we lose it.
And we won't get it next year.
We'll get it next year.
Yeah, but you didn't need it.
Exactly.
You didn't. Right. You can't justify if you can't spend where you're at. then you're not going to get your increase. So
Yeah.
you're only spent here, you got to get to here
Right.
so you can justify your increase, because if not, they're like, well, this is all you need. And then now you're cutting your department.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and looking back at the history of why these departments were created, I think I'm going to assume most of these departments were created with the best intentions in mind. Something had to get accomplished, but they just grew out of hand.
Well, if you go back
that's
to-
why we're looking at going, it's now unwieldy. It's too big. It's not, the intent is not there anymore. It's something more than what it was intended to be.
The fascinating part of this, if you go back to, I think, like Woodrow Wilson, so the turn of the century, and by then, what have we had? We had the country for 100 and whatever years.
Yeah. Right.
And
100 and a quarter.
Yeah, he takes this position, and I get it. You historians out there, you're going to get it better than I will. But I'm just going to try to summarize what I know and what I remember. But he takes his position like, we don't need no stinking. We don't need these checks on our powers anymore. The executive branch. See, we're smarter now. We've got more experience. We're educated.
We're enlightened.
I don't need, our power. We don't need to check it that way. And if you don't give me all the power, this is what we constantly hear. If you don't give us all the power, we can't fix all the problems. And the presupposition of that position is always, one, it's a problem, because it's not always a problem that they think they need to fix. And two, that even if it is a problem, they can fix it. All you got to do is give them the power. And then three, they'll never abuse the power once they get it. And that is exactly the irony, the genius irony to this is that is exactly what our founders created. So to avoid that, that we created checks and balances to avoid that ideology.
And here we are.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where, and I think you're right, Brett. I think these people, and this is what, the C.S. Lewis had some famous quotes about it, but this is in Lord Acton. I mean, you go way back, the people that think that they know what they're doing and they're doing it for your own good are the ones that the ones you should be the most skeptical of, because, they want power.
Yeah.
And the arrogance to think that they can fix everything is really amazing at times.
Lord Farquaad from Shrek. I mean,
Yeah, there you go. Shrek has got it.
Big guy.
Shrek has got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it'll be interesting, specifically if you dismantle the Department of Education, what the states can and can't do now.
Yeah.
How that will change in the next
Well,
decade.
it will send it back. It's
in
not
regards
unlike,
to how it'll develop up, and is it good, bad? We'll see. But at least there's a little bit more control on our part.
That's right. So if when we started to cram down from the federal government, the curriculum and, No Child Left Behind and all this nonsense, my understanding is education is tanked. It's counterproductive. And again,
It's not working.
It's getting worse. And, so the federal government comes in, they think they can fix it with the Department of Education cramming down a curriculum and putting standards in place. And the standards do nothing but fail. And it has a lot to do with, all right, so you've got teachers unions, you've got money. It's all the same stuff we're talking about. And look, all you have to do, I think, you know what it really was, I think, that exposed all this was COVID. When the teachers union advocated to stay home and not put our kids in school. And that's what happened, and it was an abject failure. It wasn't
and probably it came even higher than that. It came from downtown.
Came from right.
The State House. He wanted it all shut down, and everybody kind of tapped in, going, "Yeah, because I think the teachers are freaking out. I don't know. I mean, the union may have wanted it, but the teachers, what do we do? What do we do?" And then they finally figured it out. But I think it was that. What the heck are we doing here?
I think that goes back to like the education was I think when you go to school is to try to learn something that's going to help you navigate life and be able to excel in the wherever you're at and doing whatever you do to try to learn something and make a difference. If you're just going to school to learn how to take a test, kids are coming out of high school. They don't know how to balance a checkbook. They don't know how to. Yeah. They don't know how anything works. Like I don't get it.
Yeah.
So again, whatever we were doing is not working. So
right.
if we can change it, I mean, it can't get any worse, can it?
Well, and this may go down to a little bit of a rabbit hole, as we said before the show. This is what we do, but a lot of it is. I think educators can do as much as they can do. We three grew up in a different atmosphere at home than I think kids are growing up in now. That there's no support. I think representatives cannot say, "Parents, you're the problem. Why kids aren't learning." Because you're not giving them the atmosphere at home and you're not helping them at home. You're just letting them go free and you're not helping them. Well, they got to have support both during the day and at night for school.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of problem there, and nobody's going to stand up and go, you're doing, and I'm not saying government should go into homes and control that. I don't mean that, but we just, we got to recognize that
Quite
situation.
Quite the opposite, though. So it's sort of like, this kind of government action, I think not always, but like you said, Brett, a lot of times it comes from like this idea that we can help. And I think so often though, it results in the opposite of what they were trying to do.
Yes. Yeah.
And so if the government steps in and says, we're just going to take over education and we're going to create public schools and we're going to make all your kids go to school. And I'm not advocating against this, but let's just talk about it for a second. We're going to take over education and we're going to teach this curriculum and we're going to do it all at home. Because I lived through this. I raised my kids at home. I was like, well, they got it. They got it.
Yeah.
They don't got it.
And then there was a time where the light bulb came on for me early on in grade school that I realized they didn't have it. They didn't have it at all. In fact, they had it like really, really sinisterly bad with something called whole language reading. And, my kids had trouble with learning whole language. Like they don't teach you, this went on for a couple decades. They weren't teaching kids how to sound it out, like running boy.
Phonetics,
yeah. Yeah.
And, there's a whole generation of kids who have trouble reading now because of it. And why? Because, all right, somebody came up with this whole language approach and they thought it was better. They got government funding for it.
Right. And you follow the money. Because whoever came up with that idea, developed it up, got funding for it, and convinced the Department of Education this is a good thing.
That's right.
They got money. It's always that. Because it's nothing is new. My wife's a future teacher educator, Wright State University.
Well, she probably knows about the Wright State particularly,
it's
right?
It's the same. All these nuanced, new, different things that they're teaching. It's the same thing, just a different lipstick on the pig. They name it something different to get funding, just to change it a little bit. It's the same stuff, or it's just whoever's got the loudest voice gets the money, and boom, it gets implemented.
Try to help your kid with their math homework, how they do division and multiplication.
It doesn't
it's
make
impossible.
Any sense. And it's meaningless. Right?
I can do math like that. Now that kid's going to never be competitive because they have no idea how to do basic math because it's like you do dots and angles and
all three of us can start doing math in our
and I'm
head,
like, listen,
division really quick,
like long division, right?
Yeah,
my kids are like, yeah, that's how they're teaching. This is how you do it. And they're like, oh, that makes sense. I'm like, yeah, you're in.
Yeah. I mean, I even remember what was it in grade school? I think simply going to a dictionary, and I know probably dictionaries don't exist in schoolrooms anymore, but he was my Latin teacher actually. But he was saying something about simply try to, when you open a dictionary up and you want to get to the F's or the G's, just kind of guesstimate where that might be and open it up. I mean, you're using your brain kind of to save time, and it's that problem solving situation. Okay, now that's where the F's are, and then in your mind, FR, FE. You're looking at the top. And again, it may be antiquated because it's a book and you're looking at things, but it's that we were taught to kind of analyze, to kind of figure things out on your own. And maybe there are some tricks to getting it a little bit easier done.
Well, I might have been a geek, but when you're looking through a dictionary, I mean, again, a lot of you are going to be like, yeah, these people are old. But when you're looking for your word, you look at all these other words. You're like, oh, what's that mean?
Exactly.
And so you're looking up your word, and you might find 5 or 6 other. Oh, who knew that? Like, just put a little nugget in. Where now you just go right to it. Like there's no
word before it, word after it.
We're right here on this line. We're not deviating.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I forgot about the nuance.
And back to where we started, it's like if the government isn't doing these things, enforcing it, and saying we got your back on the education people. I guess we would have to ask originally, why were we originally educating our own children at home and making sure they were getting educated correctly at schools? Like, why? Because we knew we had to. And so you can't just, and I don't think we need the government to step in and say, you have to do that in your home and you have to teach this. But I think what government control and this notion like the government knows everything and can fix everything always misses is that our founders didn't, is that how capable our people are, particularly when left to their own devices without regulatory yokes on their back.
And I think you're making a good point, because I think that speaks highly of the educators we have out there right now. They want to be an educator because they love teaching kids, and they are so handicapped and so handcuffed. All these stupid regulations and what they have to teach, and teach to the test crap, that they aren't allowed to do what they love to do, and it's teach kids. And they can probably do a really good job of it if we just get the hell out of the way.
Here's the question that's really on the table: is if everybody knows we're ranked 35th now, 36th,
I've heard that number thrown around
in worldwide. I mean, that's embarrassing, but why do they want us to not get smart? Like, if we know it's a problem, we know the education system's failing and the kids aren't getting as smart as they could, what's the why are they letting it? Why are we allowing it to happen? That's really the question.
Well,
do
money.
we want dumb? Well, but how does that help anybody if we have not smart people?
Well, because they look, as
what's
Thomas
the
Sowell
benefit?
says, these programs are never judged on the outcome, only the intent. And so the problem is never that it's not that it's a bad idea of what we're doing. It's always you're just not letting me do enough. So
they just want more money to keep perpetuating the problem.
But they say they'll fix it. But you just didn't give me enough time, power, and money to do it. So
but again,
I need more.
We're rewarding the failing of the system with more money seems odd.
It does.
But
it's that convincing. Well, we haven't had enough time to do it. We haven't had enough time to do it. But to your point of why do they want to dumb it down? That's a really good question. Why is it intentful that they want stupid people coming out of schools?
I would suggest that
for the sake of not knowing to not understand what's really going on in the big picture. Both parties.
Can you imagine if you were to go and say, let's take take 1,000 students out of Upper Arlington and bring them into the Southwestern School District and swap them out, and just swap the students and put them in front of the different teachers, different environment. What does that look like? Are you going to get a better result, or you're going to get a worser result?
I don't know.
Well,
same teachers, just a different environment. And then if you're a parent, now you get to go see what those, or just take half, switch out half the class and switch it out and integrate everybody to see what that looks like. You can't possibly, if you're in a lesser productive school system and you see people come in, you can't possibly at that point go, why in the world, why do we not know this? And if you're in the other school district where you have everything, you go like, how could other people not have this?
Well, look, what you're going to get is the pushback is always this. So, if racism, inequities, et cetera. So if you're getting this, then we should get this, and everybody should be the same. And, I think it again defies, it's just a completely different mindset. If the locals are left to educate their kids, does anybody here think that that's that you can't do it? I could educate my kids. Like my school could have educated my kid. It's like, and in fact, the less government cram down, probably the more your kids are going to flourish and the more they're going to learn. Because if you try to, like, how many people have tried to say, anybody's raised kids recently, it's like the kid gets into a class, my kid's bored or nothing, this is this, they're just learning the same crap. Like you can't have a one size fits all.
Well,
and the more you try to create that, the more you get, the more it fails.
Are you suggesting that all kids do not learn the exact same way? They're the exact same thing, and at every age they are expected it, and they're all the same, and they're the creativity, the math skills, the reading.
That's right.
It's not all the same?
No, apparently
crazy.
Not.
Apparently not.
Apparently
yeah,
not.
Exactly.
Apparently not.
It goes back to the example we talked about, that okay, wasn't there a schoolhouse for every township or something? I mean, and again, this is early America. I get it. We've grown up from then, but at the same time, those kids came out pretty darn smart. Well, but they could do math in their head when they had to. Now, maybe they didn't graduate all the way through because, again, at different times, family needed the kids at home to farm. That was the thing.
That's why the summer break was. You need the kids at home, slave labor at home, so you'd go to school in the winter, stay home in the summer and work.
But I think there's some allowances here that we've got to allow local to be able to control local and allow educators to do their thing, to be able to teach the kids on a local level, understanding what they've got without being, again, handcuffed by all the stuff they have to teach that's just out there and takes up 8 hours of a 9 hour day. It takes up 8 hours,
a 9 hour day, and it just doesn't, it doesn't work. So
I always swear the next option is going to be you're going to go find one teacher that's really good in a school district, and the school district is not operating right. So you're going to get 5 parents are going to be able to go grab that teacher and say, I'm going to pay you $25,000 a year, teacher, to teach my kid. The 5 parents, one teacher to 5 kids, and they're going to have a whole school day done from 8 to noon done.
Well, this was happening during COVID,
and this is what everybody's scared about because it's about we're trying to teach the kids, not babysit them. Right. And this is not a babysitting.
Well, look, why the threat? Like why? I'm not a table pounding cause believer in homeschooling, but I've been hired by homeschoolers before to represent them against charges in various forms, right? Some of them are more like children's services stuff where there's a neglect dependency type action in juvenile court, other actually flat out crimes for truancy and things like that. But there's always a pushback against that. And, why the threat? Why does anybody care? If I want to educate my kid at home, why do they care? And a lot of it, because it challenges, one, it challenges the institution. And two, it's a threat to jobs. Because if everybody did what you're talking about, if parents were to say, this is insane, I'm going to create my own school. We're going to call it homeschool. And I'm going to hire the kind of teachers that are going to teach what I want. Non-parochial, we'll say, not religiously affiliated. And they just do it. And that was happening during COVID. And it was a huge threat to the public schools. The public schools did not like that at all. So they had this problem. They had all right, we don't want to be there because our union says we don't have to be there, and we can just sit at home and not work because schools are shut down, or we're going to have the parents do this, and then that maybe threatens our future.
I would suggest that most teachers, I truly believe most teachers really want to teach their kids. They're good. They're getting a thankless
this
job.
Is not an indictment of teachers, but the teachers union.
But it's that. But the administrative state that runs the school is the one that is really challenging and tasking, because that's coming from above, the federal government. So teachers just can't go teach. They know what the kids need. They see them every day.
Yeah, it's even state level.
Right.
Focus of tests. Test. Yeah.
I know we didn't intend to go off in this tangent, but we're doing it anyway. Yeah. But here's an interesting experience I had. I'm going to go back to whole language reading for a second, because whole language reading, as I said, and this is not me on whole language reading. This is proven and studied, and it was debunked years ago. And it was, my kids couldn't learn to read this way. They could not learn to read by, basically whole language reading is you memorize a bunch of buzzwords, short words, like the thes, these, ands, and then eventually it all starts to click and you can read, and in theory you can read even faster. Well, that probably works for some of the kids, but it doesn't come close to working for all the kids. And if your kid happens to be on the dyslexic side or has other issues, now my kids weren't dyslexic, I don't think, but they needed to learn phonetically. And now there's a program out there called Orton Gillingham, which is a phonetic-based teaching. And I was looking at Orton Gillingham, I was like, well, this is how I learned to read, damn it. I mean, this is easy. Mm-hmm. So I had to, here's the thing. I was debating a teacher, a friend of mine, and this teacher was just on and on and on and on. You don't understand, you don't get it, and, telling me all about the value of whole language reading, and I was educated on this. And it finally dawned on me. And I know it was a horrible thing to say, but I did it anyway. And I just said, it's not your fault that you learned the wrong thing. It's not your fault that your education taught you wrong. I'm not blaming you for that, but you're wrong. Mm-hmm.
Mic drop.
The teacher was wrong. It's just flat out wrong. And it's not the first time. I've been wrong about plenty of things, right? Oh. Where, and you feel like when the light bulb comes on, it feels like the floor opens up from under you. You're just like, I just want to go hide.
Was that a younger teacher too?
No.
Do you remember?
Well, I was younger. So it was when my kids were, we're going back 10, 12 years.
Because, what they learn in school does influence them, and they're walking out going, okay, this is until they have another 10 years under the belt, and they realize that wasn't that great.
That's right.
No.
So
it's just an evolution of your career.
The teachers came through and got their masters at a time when whole language reading was all the rage.
Yeah.
And they were told that it was better. They were taught that it was better. Everything is, this is better, this is better, this is better. And they were freaking wrong. They were wrong. Mm-hmm. And they clung by it to the bitter end. There's still people clinging by it to the bitter end, and they're wrong. And it just shows you, because what happened is the government crammed down, this is how we're going to teach it. And so now not only did we it's not just teaching the kids, it's teaching the teachers to teach the kids that get screwed up.
Yeah. And it'd be better to have an arsenal of different tools to teach the kids, because each kid is different.
Do you know?
Or why fix something that's not broken?
Well, yeah, that too.
Do you know the most valuable people inside, like a school, a hospital, something of that nature, non-for-profit? It's, you know who that is? These are the people they make the most money. They make more generally than the principals and stuff. These are the people that know how to go get the money.
Yeah, and
this is how you get the granting. People. They navigate that process to how do you get the funding. They're the most valuable people. It's not, the teachers don't get paid the most. So whoever gets the money, which again, it's a salesperson, they get their, I get it. Yeah. But why should it be like that? That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm going to make one more point. We're actually we'll jump ahead. We'll jump to what's next, and then we'll come back in Justice for All segment. So we brought you in, Glenn, because Vivek Ramaswamy is all the rage, talking about how Ohio is not going to have an income tax. And, I love the idea, but I also am very suspect of how this gets, one, implemented, and two, like anything else, it's the boy with the finger in the hole in the dike. It's like, all right, there's a leak somewhere. We got to plug it, and we can just call it not income tax. We're going to have to take money somewhere else to fix it. So it's a shell game, maybe is a better analogy. But anyway, what say you?
Well, as we all know, the historical ways we collect taxes are either consumption, which means you're paying every time you buy something, there's a tax added on. Money moves, there's a tax on that. Something gets sold, there's a tax on that. You buy something, tax on it. That's one piece of our tax system, right? That's a very popular one that people use. You have an income tax, which is based on money I earn, and based on different types and how you earn it, you pay different taxes based on that, right? And there's a piece of that, and this is at entity level and at an individual level. And then you have taxes that are based on things you own, like your property, which would be real estate is the primary one. Some states you pay tax on the value of your vehicle. Here in Ohio, we don't do that, but we pay tax on our value of our real estate. And then, some people want to put a tax on how much money you're worth, like a value of your wealth, like what do you have? But ultimately, this is where you get your money from, and either you are going to pick and choose all one, two, or those, because even in a state you have no income tax, you still have other taxes. They're getting money from somewhere to run their state. So what has happened is, I love Vivek's thing, like, let's get rid of the income tax. That's great, but where are they going to get their revenue from? So that means somebody else is paying it. Now in Ohio, we know that a lot of people don't pay income tax because if you make less than, 26 grand a year or something, you don't pay any tax. Mm-hmm. And up to 100,000, only 2.5%. It's not very much. But in Ohio, you got to pay your state income tax, call it 3.5%. You got to pay your city tax. Most cities are taxable anywhere from 1 to 2.5%. Right, so you're already 5%, 6% into it in Ohio. Plus, you got your 6% sales tax that they just keep adding up. 7.5%, 8% now in mm-hmm. Columbus. Well, then you got a school tax. If you're so lucky to live in a school, you got to pay school tax. And then, so which one are you going to get rid of? Right? I don't know. And we're supposed to be getting all this money from the lottery sales, the tax for the schools. Well, that obviously isn't working.
Yeah, of course
we're supposed
not.
to get it from the casino. Well, there's been a lot of money flowing into schools. That's not happening.
Right.
We're paying our property tax. You look at it, there's a big line item on there for all the different things. If you ever look at your property tax bill, you'll see where they put the money toward. Schools are a big one, and it's just so weird. You build a new house, and if it's worth $1 million, you're going to pay, $30,000 a year in property tax. You put a trailer up, you're going to pay $500 in property tax. It's the same student going to the same school, but one building's paying way more than the other. So there's an equity beyond that. So really it comes down to they're going to have to take the tax from somewhere else. If they cut one, they have to increase another.
Or they have to stop spending somewhere.
Now that's crazy talk. That was my next thing. I love that Vivek's putting the cart before the horse and saying, hey, let's talk about the taxes. But really it comes down to what should the government be spending money on, and how much do we think is appropriate? And whatever that number is, now you go down and you try to put it into one of these buckets of how you can generate revenue and figure out what's the best way where everybody's participating at some level. So some people are not getting services for free, not paying for them. And how do you make it where one group isn't paying for everything?
Well, ironically,
that's the math.
Ironically, though, so that right, the math, that is the math. But there are states doing this,
mm-hmm.
and there are people flocking to those states at alarming numbers. And I say alarming because a lot of them are coming from California, and we don't want that.
The states that have this in play: Alaska, Florida, Nevada, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming.
Florida.
Yes, I may have skipped it. I'm sorry. New Hampshire doesn't tax earned wages. I don't know how that's any different, but anyway.
Arizona has the lowest non-zero income tax, and these are the places people are going. Now, Glenn and I, before we started today, we sort of looked at that map and like, all right, so I wonder what's going on in those states that makes it work, because it's not just that they don't have any sales or state income tax. They still have money. They still have things they have to spend on. They still have a budget.
But they have something that everybody wants, and everybody's willing to pay a little bit more for that something they want. So when you go to Florida, you're going to pay a higher tax on sales tax. You're going to pay a higher tax in your hotel because they have the beach. They have Walt Disney.
So they grab a hotel tax.
That
helps make up for it.
Correct. And then if you're in Texas, well, what do you have that most everybody doesn't have? You have a lot of oil. So there's a tax on.
We've also got some tourist stuff too, right?
Correct. There's a lot of good stuff going on. Yeah. So when you have Alaska, you have a lot of oil money. So there's this extra. That is where they generate the revenue.
And they have fewer people. Some of these states just have fewer people.
Wyoming's got 600,000 people, but they're getting enough money from, I guess, the occupancy tax of people coming to see Yellowstone, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and then, maybe you could, there's an argument. We looked up Pennsylvania, and they have, I don't want to say they've eliminated all their sales tax, but they eliminate sales tax on certain things like clothing. So but I'm guessing, like if you drove through Pennsylvania, everybody sort of laughingly jokes about how bad the roads are or whatever. So, maybe what you have to do is, I think what they're doing is just recategorizing how things are getting paid for. So maybe you have to start focusing on use taxes, which is what Florida's doing. So the people who are using our resources are typically tourists. We're going to tax hotels. Fine.
If you live in Florida, you're loving it because
it's on the backs of visitors.
It's on the backs of visitors, right?
Which is fine.
And but those visitors are using the infrastructure. They're wearing out the infrastructure, so that makes sense.
Yeah. What I would rather see Vivek doing is figuring out a way to uniformly somehow make it the administrative state that runs the tax code. It is literally hundreds of millions of different exceptions, rules, and things for you. In this county, if we tax this way, if you live in that county, it's this way. If you have this type of income, it's that. And it's every locale and every state has a different set of rules. The average person has no idea that you're even subject to this rule or this tax, and that's no excuse. They'll come back and get you for it. So trying to navigate it where it's like, from a flat tax standpoint, it makes sense, but the flat tax, there's always an exception. So sales tax in Pennsylvania, right? A lot of things are exempt. Ohio, a lot of things are exempt, but a lot of things aren't. And you're trying to figure out which is which, and it comes down to one code word that's like, oh, if it's this, you are applicable. If it's that, you're not applicable to it. To try to figure out what product and services you're going to sell. If you're going to just sell legal services, okay, here's the rule. Well, if you're going to sell 50 different types of things, well, you might have 40 different rules. It's not necessarily illegal, but it's
you're right.
It's impossible to track. And so what ends up happening is they had these layers of all these tax rules. Nobody knows how to do it. They don't even know how to enforce it. And yet they keep making more and more and more rules. You're like, if Vivek can just say, look, boom, this is the number. If you make 0 to this, it's X. If you sell this, it's Y. Which is what they did in Ohio with the commercial activity tax, where they got rid of the corporate income tax in Ohio. They basically said, we're going to tax you a flat rate on your gross sales. So any money that's moved, grossed out of Ohio, we're going to pay this tax. This has been so successful. They've generated so much money because it's a tax on the gross that they've made it now. There's the first $6 million you make in Ohio as a business, you don't pay this cat tax on it.
Gross.
Right. It used to be once you made $150,000, you had to pay a nominal $150 up to $1 million. Then you would pay this other percentage. They keep raising. Now it's at $6 million. So if you come into Ohio and your business sells $5.999 million, you don't have to pay this 0.0026 tax.
Sadly, I wasn't aware of that rule.
Why?
Because I didn't make $6 million.
Well, now that you know, you won't artificially keep it but too low. But it was $3, it was $100 million. Yeah. So these are the things that.
Well, hold on. But you just made a good point. This is where I start. So if the threshold, if the ceiling is $6 million, or if it's $1 million,
that's just one tax, though.
That's just I got you. Okay. So then, what do people do to start? sanding the edges a little bit to get around. So I don't want to make $6 million this year, so I'm not going to call it gross income. I'm going to call it something else. Or we're going to have capital invested. Is there a way that people are getting around it?
Well, it's really hard. They make you kind of combine things, but at the end of the day, it's not. Again, what's crazy about taxes on companies is like, oh, I got to pay an extra $10,000 in tax. I got to raise, the cost of my goods or services by enough to cover that tax and more because I still got to make my profit.
It's really a sales tax.
So it's correct. You just keep perpetuating and keep adding to the thing because you got to keep paying these extra taxes.
It's like the minimum wage requirements. Like, oh yeah, our workers are going to make so much more. It's like, yeah, you're going to pay for it. Yeah. Because guess what? If I can't make the burger for $2 anymore and I got to pay, and now it's going to cost you $4.
And this is where, again, I truly blame the politicians, but I don't think they know it, but they don't know what to do about it because they don't understand. The administrative state has been taken over the Department of Taxation to make these rules. Like we're going to give a tax, then they make the rules. Well, nobody knows what that means. And you can't go after somebody if they're wrongly doing something because they're an administrative agency. They have the total power. The politicians like, we're not touching that. So it's incumbent on probably a politician to say either they like the chaos, which it appears that's what they like, or they're going to do something about it. And hope Vivek they can do something about it.
I was going to say, so from what I'm reading, he has indicated that states without income taxes like Florida and Texas, I'm going to reread what I just did here, manage revenues through other means such as sales and property taxes. Now, Ohio is already ranked number 11 in the country for property tax. So I mean, we got to stop that bleeding, because you can't afford to live in Ohio.
And I do
we're attracting all these jobs, our companies to create jobs, but there's no frickin' nowhere to live.
Well, not on top of that, but it's the property tax system rewards new developers,
correct,
to say, oh, if you build here, you don't have to pay property taxes for 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, the person that has been there and is employing people, they ought to pay top dollar, but the new people, they get an exemption. Now there's like competitive unfairness. That's not fair.
Right.
And don't forget, Texas has one of the highest property taxes. They have a really high property tax.
Yeah.
And Florida is sort of capped.
Which doesn't seem to be hurting them because people are flocking to go there. So
commerce is happening. Less regulation.
Something's counterbalancing that.
It's not the weather. It is not the weather.
No.
It has nothing to do with anything.
No. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I mean, look, on the face of it, it could just be this. Boy, I'm paying this much in state income tax, but over here, I don't have to pay that much in state income. I'm going there. Or, and like with California, it's probably coupled with that plus like 10 other things. Like I'm paying this much, and guess what? I can't go down the street without getting mugged. My stores are all barred up because
you can't insure your home.
I can't insure my home
in
because
California.
of insurance regulatory.
And Florida,
California, once you make over, I think it's $1 million, they add an extra tax on top. It's very like, punitive.
So it's like, so you're just going to go to any port in a storm at that point.
So remember, lots of clients that do this. We when they retire, if you're going to make $50,000 on your retirement and you're got to pay your 2.5% or whatever the number is. Ends up being like 2%. That's probably not going to be enough to make you move to Florida. But if you're going to retire and you're going to be making $1 million a year, and between the state income tax, that's $35,000 a year to pay 3.5% on that. Say, well, that might be worth it to say I'm going to spend 6 months in a day in Florida, and I just made $35,000 because I'm going to be there anyway because I like the weather and do whatever.
Yeah.
So I think we're losing a lot of retirees that are flocking. Again, they got smarter. They want to stay here in the winter, but there is a financial incentive. If you make enough money, it makes sense to move to a lesser tax place, especially if you're on a fixed income. So this is one of the things we're trying to do is people go here, raise their family. They get a little older. They retire. They're like, I'm out of here. And then they don't pay those taxes back to Ohio.
Well, and that's just it. So like California, just because they say we're going to tax, they have this punitive tax, doesn't mean that people are going to stick around and pay it, and they won't. So, and this is the same is true, sort of a bigger picture. If you're going to create this, the corporations need to pay their fair share. Well, guess what? They're going to leave, and they're not going to pay any share if you do that. So you can't, without really, really draconian restrictions, like you can't leave our state type of restrictions. You can't enforce some of this stuff because people are free to leave.
Well, I think that's the cool part. I've just believed this, and again, it's my personal opinion because I get to see who pays the tax. I get to see how much it is and what it looks like. And it's just amazing to me that there's, 68 million people in the U.S. that do not pay any tax. They just don't pay anything. Well, they get the benefits. So there has to be some sort of nominal flat tax that everybody has to pay. There's got to be some sort of nominal sales tax so everybody's participating because everybody's getting the services and the goods. Why is it? It's immoral to me that say somebody, they don't have to pay for something. I have to pay for it, but they don't, and they get the benefit of it. If they drive on the road, that's not fair.
True,
Ethically, that's
right.
a problem for me. Pay something for the effort. Now, I don't know what that is, right? We got to define that, but this all goes back to how much money do we need?
And it's gotten so complicated by special interests and incentives. This is the government tinkering in the economy. They think they can meddle in it by offering incentives here or there or giving special interests a plus.
And these things do work they do have these opportunity zones where you invest in certain areas, and there's different things you can do that will stimulate. The tax code is a lever that is used to stimulate social behavior. We need more kids. Let's give a child tax credit. We need to keep the housing market going. We're going to let you deduct your mortgage interest. We feel like we need more people spending money. We're going to let you deduct credit card interest. We used to do that back in the day. We need investment in this lower income area that needs some help. So if you invest in there, you don't have to pay tax on the money you make there. Or if you, we want you to forgive your student loan. Okay, as a doctor, you go work and live in this kind of distressed neighborhood for 10 years. You don't have to pay your student loan back. There's all these different.
But it's all that kind of crap that created the problem in the first place. So it's like if I really am, I tack a lot more libertarian on a lot of this stuff. It's like if the government just did nothing, I think it would be astounded to find how capable we are as a population to take care of ourselves. We don't need it. And some of this, so bad government policy has created squalor in so many places. And if you just stop government policy, that would be a great start. Just stop it. And instead what they do is we're going to do more. And I get what you're saying. The government will try to incentivize it this or that way, but there's almost always an adverse consequence to that, always. Or somebody else is going to have to pay it. So like you said, so we're going to let doctors do it. So I'm paying for the damn doctor to go to school for free because we want, so whatever it would be. I think nothing is better than something sometimes.
But I don't dislike that because at the end of the day, somebody who goes and leverages their whole life and spends their 12 years in college to go be a doctor, they're doing it for the money. They're probably not. They can't support their family if they go into this particular area to work because they don't have the money to pay them. So if they're willing, if they truly are, do the oath and do the thing to be a doctor, and they want to make a difference, they're like, all right, I'll do this and go, help the people. You're going to take care of my $450,000 of student loans. I'll give you 10 years of my life to try to make this community better. Maybe they stay, maybe they don't, but at least that community got a competent person they might not have gotten in the past.
Well, and you don't have the hospital deserts. What is it? 7 or 8 of our 88 counties have no hospital. They need medical care. I mean, they have to drive an hour just for medical care. I think there's something to that work it off kind of feel to it, and it could benefit the community all the way around. They're healthier. Then there's less strain on health services because it's a healthier community.
I could debate this all day long because the presumption is, of course, that the doctors will make the community healthier, and I'm not.
They're not going to make them healthier.
Convinced of that.
They're not making them healthy. They're servicing,
or that they're even. So I would. You would have to ask if the government did nothing, what would happen? If you didn't incentivize that, what would happen? If there's a market for healthcare, you're saying there is never going to be a market for healthcare in certain areas, and I think I might disagree. I think there's going to be somebody who is going to say, well, look, nobody else is there. I'm going.
Well, and that's a good point. Why isn't an Ohio Health or a hospital system looking at those counties and plopping at least a building down there that's manned for 3 days a week or something?
An old Sawbones who wants to just be a doc.
That's true.
Because the docs are regulated to the point they can't do that.
Right. It's the reimbursement for the physician from the Medicare and the insurance. They charge $1,000 for the procedure, which is a normal rate. They're going to get reimbursed $250.
That's right.
They have to make it in volume, and in volume, there's not enough volume in the rural area.
You're presupposing keeping the current system in place.
No, not necessarily. I'm saying that I think there are some good pieces to it, but again, I don't know how they're evaluating what that works. But Dr. Hogan, Doc Hollywood, the country doctor, he just knew what the deal was. He didn't need to go out and make $100 million a year. He's happy just servicing his community. And there's people like that.
I've said for years, I wonder what would happen if you just, like, if we could wave a magic wand and live in this sliding doors alternative universe, and we would say, you know what, we're just going to eliminate the healthcare nonsense the way we see it. And if you want to go to a doctor, you pull out your wallet and you say, I need medication I need you to treat me for my cold. What the doc is probably going to tell you, if you go into a doctor for a cold, he's going to say, yeah, I tell you what, you can drink a lot of water, take 2 aspirin, and rest for, a dozen days. Or you can take an aspirin, drink a lot of water, and go to work for a dozen days, and you're still going to feel like crap. It'll be done either way. It's like there is no cure. So what have they done? The way our system is now, you're going to get like a prescription for this, a prescription for that, a prescription for that, and then they're going to bill for it. So I would wonder if you just said, all right, I need some medical care, I'm going to pay for it. What would it cost? It would baseline the market overnight.
Well, this is exactly.
I use that. That's an exaggeration, but it wouldn't take long.
From the primary care standpoint, there are doctors that have this, we'll call it a boutique practice, where they'll say, I'm going to have 500 clients, and each client's going to pay me $1,000 a year, and they can come and see me anytime I'm limited. I'll write the scripts, I'll see them, and I got this doctor concierge service, and maybe it's only 100 clients, whatever the doctor wants. They don't have to deal with the rigmarole, and these are all private pay. There's no insurance. Just come in and pay for fee for service, and so we're separating the people that want the exceptional, the care that they were willing to pay it, whatever that is, $1,000, $2,000 a year, and know they have somebody, versus the person that's going to be paying $26,000 a year for health insurance and going to go in and wait in line wherever they're going to wait in line to do what they want, because nobody can. There's too many people that need care or think they need care, whatever the case may be. So that's even a bigger rabbit hole. And again, I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just saying it seems to me that if you could tighten up or make it less complex, the taxing structure of who is paying for what, it would make probably things a little easier, and they would probably get more money.
And you wouldn't be out of a job because of that.
Well, I don't.
You
honest
wouldn't
to God, I say this. I've been saying this my whole career. If there was no more income tax, I would be the first person to say, "This is awesome. I'll go find another job. I don't care." Yeah. Like the income tax burden that is putting on companies, and as a person, if you make X, you got to pay half your income to tax. That's just punitive. Like, that's not fair, right?
And the bigger picture of what we're talking about is this. So the government says we're going to subsidize student loans, and we're going to make it more viable for everybody to go to school. Everybody ought to have an education, and we're going to subsidize it. So then doctors are going to say, well, look, I good. That's awesome. We're going to go take a loan out, and I'm going to go to school, and I'm going to go to med school, and I'm going to finish in whatever years and whatever. But then what happens? Well, since the government's paying for it, the prices go up. And they're guaranteed, so the prices go up. So now it costs too much to go to med school, and you have to get, and it's created this problem. So then they come out in debt, and they can't then go work in a small town environment because they owe too much money, and there's not enough money to be made. So, like, I'm a woodworker, and I always use this analogy. It's like when anybody's ever tried to make a picture frame or something square with a 45-degree cut, and one of them's a little bit off, and you think, well, I can just tweak that one. But then you realize, well, that's the next one's off, and then the next one's off, and then the next one's off. And pretty soon you got to start over because you got no more.
You just make a circular frame.
Right. That's right. You got no more wood left. And it's eventually it doesn't work. You can't, the more tweaking you do, the more tweaking it needs. And what you really needed to do is just nothing. You're better off just leaving it broken a little bit, or leaving a little tiny gap, because as I used to say as a woodworker, perfection is absolutely necessary yet completely unattainable. So you have to, because wood moves, and it's like there's like little micro things, and it's like, it's not
never going to work.
You're never going to get it completely perfect. Yeah. So that's why we have things like raised panel doors, because they know wood expands and contracts, and it's not, so the panel floats. It's like we just accept it that it can't be perfect.
Well, I think that's the education for a higher education, is that when it shouldn't cost more in theory, because they don't need the books, everything's digital, electronic. The knowledge is not centered at the university anymore. It's out there. Mm-hmm. So I'm unsure why, when I was going to Ohio State, it was $300 a quarter, which seemed like $1 billion, and now it's perfectly fine for that to be whatever it is, $12,000 a semester. Like, I don't know where that value is going. And again, to your point, the people that know how to get the money, the federal, state give the university the money, but yet you as a student are still paying. Where is all this money coming from? Where is it going?
You know where it's going.
I know, but this is my point.
You're creating entire departments to deal with it.
It creates more of a thing, and like at the end of the day, of like, look, we're just going to pay some professors to do some work, and like if there's a separate section of research, I don't know.
And if you don't know what I'm meaning, you take away the educators, universities, the professors or adjuncts, whatever. This administrative state at universities.
There's more administrators now than teachers by tenfold, right?
Exactly. That ratio is 5 to 10 to 1. Mm-hmm. It's way too administrative heavy.
Because they're the ones that get the money.
And they're idiots running the university,
like you said,
too.
And to your point about the government's like, we'll give students more money, loans, to get them into buying into this product that they're never going to be able to support themselves to pay it off. But that's only, the student loans is just a fraction of the money being spent on education. Mm-hmm. The amount we're paying in tax that's coming looping around. This is where, again, you got to get back to what should the citizens, the citizens be paying for, what services should they be expecting from their tax dollars? What does that really cost in a real world example, not fantasy world?
And you get a guy like DeSantis down in Florida who sort of runs it like a business.
Correct.
And people are satisfied with that. And you can hate him, you can like him, you can whatever. But, a good business is run efficiently and it works, and that's that. So.
And I'm telling you, in Ohio, we have a surplus, and they have been cutting the rates since I've been doing this since way back in 1989. They have been cutting the income tax rate, cutting the rates. They keep cutting the rates, and the revenue keeps going up because there's more people participating. Mm-hmm. But the more they make, the more they're spending.
Right.
Can you imagine if they keep cutting the rates and instead of spending it, how far they could cut the rates? So to Vivek's thing, which I think was what Trump's trying to do and everything, is that if you can keep commerce where everybody's participating, everybody's paying except a select few, the rates can come down and you can still have enough money to pay for the services. Yep. But those services that the government's supposed to be funding, it's just an unlimited budget.
Well,
unlimited.
And to your point, that extra funding is funding the vouchers, for example.
Right.
Good or bad, I'm just saying that's what it is. And do I really want my tax dollars doing that? Not necessarily. I've made that point before. But there are a lot of other things I don't want my money to be spent on either, that sort of thing. But that's a good point.
But here, and as things change, they more stay the same. But right now, if you're driving an electric car, you're not paying gas tax, which is like 40-some cents a gallon.
So how are we going to take care of the roads now?
So now who's getting the roads? So like
they're getting taxed on the registration though.
Right, okay, but
I'm just saying,
but it's not.
I don't know if it's equal.
It's not even close.
I know.
And again, if I'm going to buy a gas car or an electric car, why do they get a subsidy? Right. And I'm buying a gas car. Why don't I
because gas is bad.
Right. Well, we know this. It's definitely horrible, but there's definitely a lot of oil. But that's a different argument. The argument says if you're using the road, you should pay. Now, is that a toll? Is that an automatic thing that happens? Because you guys know now when you drive through the turnpikes or whatever, you just automatically you get a bill in the mail that you got to pay this thing. Yeah. Like before you had to stop and hand the quarters over to the person, and they're wearing gloves, and there's it's a different. I mean, just by making that electronic, you don't have to pay all the people to sit at the entrance and exit to take your money. So there's definitely smarter ways to do this, but again, I don't know what the magic use of cash is, but the actual extracting the tax from the people, from the companies, from everybody, it's definitely a science.
I like your term extract.
Vivek is yet to tell us how he's going to implement all this, and you and I both did a little bit of a dive. I can't say I spent hours researching it, but I looked what's his plan, and he's like, his plan is to get rid of it, and because we can, and then he said, and to be fair, there was also a comment that he's going to have to explore the budget and some other things to try to work it off on the off or deal with it on the backside, but. I think to your point, it'll probably be a little bit of both. It'll probably be he's going to try to cut some of the budget. He's going to try to get more efficient, and then he's going to have to collect money somewhere else.
Yeah.
And again, if everybody is participating in it to some level, that would be an equitable way to do it, whether it's a percentage of some sort. But again, That's like, we're going to raise prices because we got expenses increasing. Well, what's the market going to bear? What can people afford to pay? What does this look like? Again, if you buy a house in Ohio, we're getting to California level almost now.
Yeah.
What you're paying for a piece of real estate, it's not even close.
Well,
but, it keeps going up.
But it's not good.
It's going up.
Yeah.
And I think the takeaway of this is, folks, and this is true at this show at all. We don't know everything. I don't know the answers to this. I just know that when I see stuff like this, it makes me want to question it a little bit, if not a little bit, a lot, actually, to say, all right, how's he going to do it? What's going on? Mm-hmm. We're relatively smart people, I think, or at least capable.
Well, and I thought the topic was intriguing because if there's a handful of states already doing it, how does that affecting them?
How are they doing it and why?
Yeah.
And it's not just because they're doing it, we can do it, because I think there's geographical differences in our country.
Yeah.
There are population differences. I mean, there's lots of stuff that's different.
The main one is the natural resources that people want, which includes beaches, which includes
the geographical
mountains,
stuff,
which includes oil. It also includes there's that piece, but it's like the commerce that's happening. Why are people there? How do you get that kind of money? Again, it's not.
Well, it's easy to say. Like I always said about running a business to you, it's easy to run a business when you're making money. So Florida's making money, right? Because there's tourism. Now,
but Ohio, in all defense, Ohio is making money. I think we have a surplus. We're doing well, and so at least you got to give the legislators credit. They keep reducing rates and raising exemptions, doing those things, but they're not addressing the real elephant in the room, which is the increasing property taxes, which makes it almost impossible to actually own anything. And again, they're not addressing the issue where people are leaving because that rate is still too high, the income tax rate.
Gotcha.
People want to leave.
Yeah.
All right. Well, a couple quick things. In Justice for All, we're just going to buzz through it because we're getting towards the end. But in Justice for All, this week we've got some interesting stuff going on right here in Ohio. The Franklin County Court of Common Pleas has actually issued an order. The judges have gotten together, all 17 of them, I guess, and have said they made some rules about ICE coming into their courtrooms without warrants to arrest people who are unlawfully in the country. And it's not exactly what everybody says, but it's not exactly not what everybody says either. And we don't have time to do a dive into this, but I will say this: it will be interesting because this sort of opens the door to all sorts of arguments about what the local authorities can do to prevent the federal government from doing things. And, there's threats of contempt and otherwise. So we will watch this thing unfold as it matriculates up the court system. And along those lines, we've got now several judges throughout the country striking down some of the Trump executive orders. And I see this, the most fascinating issue I see out of this is, I don't want to say is not, but an equally fascinating issue I see coming out of this, aside from the fact that we want to see if the president's orders are going to be held constitutional. I think we are long overdue for some sort of Supreme Court pronouncement on whether a district court judge in whatever USA, federal district court judge in whatever USA, has the actual authority to issue an order preventing the federal government from implementing a policy anywhere in the country or across the country totally. So in law, we call this forum shopping. We're going to go find a friendly judge to our cause. We're going to go file an action in that judge's courtroom because we know that judge is with a nudge, nudge, wink, wink is going to rule our way. And that's what Trump's gripe is about. He goes, these leftist judges, we're going to impeach them. What he's really saying is, look, they're choosing his opponents are picking and choosing places to file these actions, knowing that they're going to get a friendly judge's ear who's going to issue the order because the judge agrees with them. And I'm not saying it's improper for the judge to do it. I'm not saying it's proper, but the judge agrees with them constitutionally. They're going to issue the order. It doesn't mean that Trump's going to lose. It doesn't mean the other side's going to win or vice versa. But we will, I think, in the course of these orders going up the appellate ladder in federal court, we're going to get to the U.S. Supreme Court where we're going to get answers constitutionally, like them or not, on what's the presidential power over administrative agencies, what's the power of district court judges to issue injunctions across the board.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yeah.
So we've got judge in Podunk, wherever, and it doesn't matter who the judge is. It doesn't matter who the president is. And the president says, I have something I believe is in my executive powers to do. And Podunk judge says, you can't do that. How does the judge enforce
contempt?
Well, how does he go and say, well, who's that judge going to send to whoever the president is or person to enforce that? Who has more power? That judge is sending his local sheriff, or is the president who has the Secret Service and the FBI?
Well, this is the complaint.
Who's in charge?
This is what the Trump's opponents are sort of railing about. They're like, well, Trump's not going to follow the judge's orders.
Well, forget it's even Trump. Let's just keep it generic here.
So the president's not going to follow the judge's orders. And to some extent, this is a gentleman's agreement in our country. This is like you go all the way back to the beginning. There's a case called Marbury versus Madison, where John Marshall, read the history, it's fascinating, but eventually John Marshall, who becomes the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, who was formerly working under Adams, but he says, look, I am going to declare that what you're trying to do, or what the president is trying to do here, is unconstitutional, and you have to listen to me. It's not in the Constitution, but it created something called judicial review. It created a process where our courts get to strike down on constitutional grounds what another branch of government is doing. And how do we enforce that? Well, I mean, they don't have an army, right? So it just has been this understood thing. Does Trump have to follow it? Well, the judge, in theory, could issue a contempt order and say, I'm going to hold the president in contempt, or his this agency or this actor in contempt, and that, play it out. I don't know. Does the marshal going to go follow the judge around or the courts around and arrest people? This is dangerous in some level. Yeah. On the other hand, I don't think Trump or any other president is really going to do this. I think what's going to happen, and by the way, I shouldn't just start. Those of you who are up in arms about what Trump is saying and doing on this, I didn't hear you when Biden was doing the same thing with respect to student loans and the student loan forgiveness, that the courts were telling him he didn't have constitutional authority to do it. And he's like, we're going to do it anyway. Yeah. Or when the abortion got struck down, we're going to do it anyway. So look, I'm not suggesting one is worse or better than the other, but come on, right? Yeah. This is not new. So I think it'll just work itself out. I don't know what would happen. The Civil War.
So if it does go up to the Supreme Court, has Chief Justice John Roberts already played his hand? Roberts
is sort of, and I don't agree with Roberts on this, frankly. I like the idea of a court being this sort of mysterious mysterious group in the sky that doesn't step down to the political debate. So Trump tweets basically, I'm going to impeach this thing, and Roberts comes over the top and makes a statement that the judges are sanctioned and blah blah blah,
which was
blah.
Really unusual.
Really unusual. And I think what he's saying is, I think what he's really trying to do. He's a sort of a keep the peace type of guy. He doesn't like the unrest.
It came out to me, it's like he's trying to kind of have the other justices back, kind of playing the brotherhood thing here.
I think what he's trying to do, like he sees his role as keeping the peace. So he's going to make this statement like, "Don't worry, country, we're not going to let this happen." Yeah. And I think Trump is one of the criticisms, a legitimate one. He's sort of bombastic and he says things that he's not going to do. He's just, I'm going to go blah blah blah. We're going to take over there. And he doesn't do it. And I think those who support Trump sort of say, yeah, he's going to say it. There's probably those who think he's going to do it because he said it. There's probably most of the people who think, yeah, he's just, puffing again.
And remember,
and then the other side, no matter what he says, they're going to use it against him.
And it doesn't matter if you're left or right, whoever's in presidential power at that point in time. I don't think we want to be in a situation where somebody in one little district is controlling the will of 340 million people.
But also remember, it's only temporary, because what happens is, as soon as that order comes out, it gets appealed and it goes to the circuit court right above. And as soon as that happens, it gets appealed. It goes to the U.S. Supreme Court.
But you and I both know they just rattle them off one at a time, and they'll keep it tied up in court forever. So somebody has to rule on something. And I was just wondering, what happens if you just don't say, no, I'm not doing that? Well, who's going to force who to do what?
It gets ugly. It gets ugly. So look, so far we haven't seen it. I think what's going to happen is this is going to get up to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's not unheard of in our history. Something similar went down with the New Deal. Mm-hmm. With FDR's New Deal. Mm-hmm. He was trying to regulate the crap out of the entire country. The U.S. Supreme or the courts were saying, no, you don't have constitutional authority to do that. And eventually what he did is say, I'm going to add justices. This is, he threatened to pack the court. I'm going to add justices until you go my way. And then there was this astounding revelation, a stitch in time, save 9, as they say. But, and then all of a sudden, all this regulatory stuff that FDR was trying to do was magically constitutional overnight.
Well, it just seems like things have to move efficiently, and if there's something happening and the president says, oh, we got to do this to protect the country or do this and this, and the court says, no, you can't do that, and we just have to let something overrun us because some judge, that doesn't seem like that is how it's supposed to be written to me.
It is not supposed to work. It is not supposed to work smoothly.
As an average guy, I'm like, I just don't understand how we can have the power to do that.
That's
well,
doesn't make sense.
And I think some of that too is that antiquated the rule, this law from the 1890s or something like that. I think that had a little nuance to it. Going, where are you pulling this from? Sort of thing.
I mean, for whatever it's worth, personally, I think Trump has every right to do what he's doing, like it or not, agree with it or not. I think he does, and I think that's how the Supreme Court's going to rule on it. But this judge right here has said no, or a couple judges have said no. So
it's definitely interesting how he's pushing the boundaries on the interpretations of stuff.
And here's where I urge people to be at least intellectually honest and say, all right, I believe that Trump has the power, or the president has the power to do what he's trying to do, even though I disagree with it. I believe it's constitutional. That's the difference. You have to maintain that line, even if it's something you don't like. Yeah. Otherwise, that's where the chaos happens.
Because you don't get that right when your guy's in or woman's in, whatever the case might be.
When it comes around.
Yeah, exactly.
So look, let's finalize here. Wonderfully outrageous stuff. Glenn, you want to go first? What's great in your world these days?
I'm going to go see Seinfeld tonight. I think that's going to be a hoot. He's still putting it out. I'm looking forward to that.
That's cool. I saw that when the NASA astronauts came back home, they were welcomed by a pod of dolphins.
Isn't that crazy?
I love that. That's so cool. Mother Nature's just the coolest.
They all had implants from us, so they knew where to go.
Right.
Right. Oh, that was fun.
I love that. I love March Madness, guys. I'm not a huge basketball fan, but I love it because it's like it brings people together. It gets people out, and it gets people drinking. Hopefully, not driving. And partying and spending money in the economy, and it's sort of that. This is when the world or the city picks up again. This time of year, and weather's good.
It's the gateway.
Life is happy. Yeah. Outrageous for me. Have you guys seen the story on the Federal Mediation and Conciliation Services, the FMCS? It occupied a 9-story office tower in D.C.'s K Street for only 60 employees, and this is like Doge went in or somebody went in and exposed all this. I don't think it was Doge. But they're paying themselves outrageous salaries. They're not living there. They're saying they're living in D.C. or they live in a different state, so they can say their time they're spending in D.C. is travel, so they get a budget. Look it up. It's insane. Like completely corrupt. I assume they're all going to get indicted sooner or later. But
that's got to put them in
horrible.
prison.
I was going to go more into it, but we're out of time. Outrageous.
There's a federal jury in Cleveland convicted a Texas man today for writing and deploying malicious code on his former employer's network.
Malicious code on the network. So he the Trojan horse.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fascinated, but it's like, oh my gosh, anybody can screw up anybody. Can you imagine? You fire somebody and it just your house is down
just like that.
Oh my God.
Disgruntled employees.
Wow, and that's how Ohio focus. So I bring it back home again. Oh my God, yeah.
All right, you got anything outrageous?
You don't have
offices
on King Avenue, and the road is horrible for decades. They will not pave it, but yet they're putting these really great permanent, I think it looks like flower pots, and it's been doing this for like 5 months, and I'm like, are they ever going to fix the road, or are they just going to make it look pretty on the side of the road where I don't actually drive?
Unnavigable, but pretty.
I'm trying to figure that out, and this has been this corridor has been the curse of the city of Columbus. Will not make that a nice road. It's the craziest thing.
It's not really a King Avenue.
Lane Avenue is beautiful. Yeah. The King Avenue is not so much. Fifth Avenue, not so much.
You're not a corridor to anywhere.
No.
Well, we covered it all from monkeys, the Scopes monkey trial, all the way to flowers on King Avenue. We're going to finalize that with Common Sense Ohio. You can check us out at commonsenseohioshow.com. We have Glenn Harper today, our sponsor, Harper Plus Accounting, in the middle of accounting season too, or tax season.
Oh, there's no better time. Need a break to recharge.
I'm going to come over here to the studio and do a show during tax season. Yeah. Man, if your accountant's not doing that, then you got the wrong accountant.
Exactly.
Definitely. I'm going to come back fresh as a daisy.
All right. Right from the middle each and every week, at least until now.